Alright, hello everybody. It's me. Today I thought, let's install Gentoo. So, first off, you're probably already going to notice something, and that is I am already in a Linux environment, and you would be correct. I'm actually running Arch Linux. I just have it installed because it's reliable, and when I need something to work, it's working. So here you can see the specs of my machine. I have a 3700X, 16 cores, or 16 threads, sorry, a RX 5700 XT, and it lists a bunch of them, but mine's the RX 480 and 32 gigs of RAM. That's probably the most important of my specs, but I'll go into why I have two of these graphics cards. So I have the 5700 XT as the primary card that I'll use on Linux. And then I have a RX 480 inserted to use as a card for virtual machines, which we'll get into as well, but that'll be a part two. The RX 480 is specifically to run certain games in a Windows VM because not all games will work under Linux. Most notably Rainbow Six Siege, so I can just run them in a virtual machine and they will basically work like they do on Windows, given some caveats of some things not working very well, but not. It's a lower end card that I'm just going to use in a virtual machine because I don't. Because using the 480 on my main, where most of my games I'm going to play anyways, and using a 5700 XT in a virtual machine that I'm probably barely going to open a whole lot isn't really worth the whole effort. And I could do single GPU pass through, but that's never worked for me. At least with an RX 5700 XT, I always run into some kind of problems, or it just does not work at all. So, I'm not going to bother messing with that. So, now that I've gone through the rundown of my specs, I guess we should probably go ahead and get started with an LSBLK. So I have four disks or four drives in my computer. I have this 4 terabyte hard drive that I use for Linux. I have this 2 terabyte hard drive that I'm going to use in a Windows VM. This has all of my Steam games on it, but this is just for me to run in a virtual machine. And then I have two NVMe SSDs. This one here is currently my primary Linux drive, and this has an installation of Windows that I'm actually going to be removing. Now, I already have this entire Windows backup, this Windows install here. I actually have it backed up over here. As you can see, this is a 1 terabyte image, and I can actually go ahead and double click on it, and it will actually go ahead and mount it. So I have all of my stuff backed up basically, so if something goes wrong, then I have this here, and all I need to do really is to just go to the GNOME disk utility here and basically just click this, restore disk image, give it this, and write the image back over to the drive, and it will basically pretend like Gentoo was never installed on this drive, but we're going to be wiping it. So the easiest way that I know to wipe an SSD or a entire drive is to just open parted. So, well, it actually helps to put dev first, NVMe 1N1. We're not super user. Oh, I should probably just become sudo for this. So yeah, parted dev NVMe 1N1, and we're just gonna do make label GPT, type yes, and if I go and type quit and lsplk, yeah, the entire disk is wiped, so we're good there. And then I'm going to go ahead and enter cf disk to go ahead and set up the drive. So this is 1 terabyte, so I'm going to go a little overkill and give it a 512 megabyte EFI system. And we'll do a 32 gigabyte swap partition. When it comes to swap, some people do the amount of RAM that you have in your computer, and some do double. I'm just going to do 32 because 64 gigs of swap memory is a little overkill for what I mostly do. And the rest of the drive will be partitioned as the root file system and our home directory. And I say that because you can technically, I guess, have your home directory somewhere else, but I'm not a kind of person that likes to do that. So yeah, so we're gonna need to go ahead and partition, or write the partitions to those partitions that we made. We need to put them in a file system. That's right. We need to write file systems to them. So we're going to do that real quick. Fat. Okay. So we'll do lsplk real quick, and yeah. So we're going to also need to make a place to mount it. So we're going to make a mount here called /mount Gentoo, and we're going to, I guess, go ahead and mount we're going to go ahead and mount that there. So the next thing that we need to do is we're going to need to come over here, and we're going to need to pick a stage 3 archive. Normally I use hardened, but I've been doing some things recently, and I'm not too sure if it was a problem with hardened or just base, but I switched to base on my machine, and then it started working, but it wasn't working when I was using hardened. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the regular here real quick, and well, actually that's going to download that, but I don't want to download it through Microsoft Edge. This is the nice thing about what you can do with Gentoo, is that you can actually install Gentoo, and you don't actually need to burn the Gentoo installation ISO. Plus, you don't need to use something like your phone or another computer to have the Gentoo wiki open. You can just use the same machine that you're installing Gentoo to also install Gentoo. Normally what I have is a 8GB SD card that has Linux Mint on it, but I already had Arch Linux installed on this, so we're just going to go ahead and use, well, Arch Linux here to install Gentoo. So yeah, so really, instead of having to use links to find this, you can just copy link, go here, cd to mount Gentoo real quick, and then just, well, wget it. Like that. So that's the nice thing about using I guess a Linux environment like this, is that you can go ahead and just find it really easily. This looks like this is going to take him a bit, so I'll be back once this is done, until this is done. Alrighty, now that this is done downloading, we're going to go ahead and extract the archive. So tar xpvf, I'll just do that. Stage 3, x headers include star numeric owner. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and, I'm not going to delete the stage 3 archive, I'm actually going to move the stage 3 to my hard drive real quick right now. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So you're going to look, so far this looks like a regular, I guess, root directory. Yeah, this is very similar to the one that I have on, here on Arch Linux. So yeah. So, whoop. Here. Guess here, huh? That's a little bit too. Oh, we're gonna need to go ahead and actually, hold on. think we need to copy this first, and then we're going to go vim into portage.make.conf. So this is the main configuration file for Gentoo's package manager portage. This you are going to want to configure to be built, I guess, around your system. So here I'm going to go ahead and do march equals zn ver2. Now I should note that I'm doing this because I have a Gentoo processor with my 3700X. If you are unsure what to put here, you can put native, I think it is, and it will just either automatically do something. I think it'll automatically figure it out, but I know what mine is. It is zn ver2. So I'm going to put that there. I'm going to put portage niceness equals 1 here because I am recording, so I do want that there for right now so that it doesn't eat all of my CPU resources while I'm doing this. We're going to do the make auth, which is very important that you set. So I'm going to do minus J15 and minus L15. This is for the how many jobs it should do while compiling stuff and the load average. I have 16 threads in my system, so I'm giving it 15. You don't want to give it all of your CPU resources. I would say at least keep one thread for the system to use. But you know, the rest of the 15, you know, it can go to town. But you should but if you have, say, a 4-core and 8-thread system, you should set this to 7. Now, if you don't know how to figure out how many threads you have, it's simple. You can either do neofetch, and it will tell you mostly it'll tell you, but this right here, I have 16 threads in my system, so it's going to show it there. Another way is you can use lscpu-a, I think it is. There we go. So you'd want to run lscpu -all -extended, and it will give you, and you really just want to look at the CPU section here. I have, again, 16, so it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 15. And I'll go ahead and okay, so I'll go ahead and run up my server here, and as you can see, this only has 4 cores and 4 threads, so I only have it'll show 4 here. But again, if you had more, then it would show up with more, but if you have less, it's going to show up with less here. So yeah, you'd want to take the amount that you have, subtract it by 1, and that's what you'd want to put here. So I have 16, take 1/3 out, I'd put 15. The next section here is emerge default ops. This is what it'll go ahead and run every time you use the emerge command. So jobs equals 15, load average equals 15, ask auto unmask continue. Yeah, that's it. I'm not really going to go into auto unmask continue, but it's something that I don't specifically remember what you need this for, but it helps. Ask is just, you know, when you install something, it will ask, do you want to install this package? Jobs and load average are the same here, but this is for portage. And then the most important one in portage is the use flags. This, when you install certain applications, as far as I'm aware, it enables and disables certain things. So we're going to do experimental ALS audio, ALSA, X minus Wayland. Actually, I'll let the operating system decide for me. elogin D, definitely need that. And I'm not going to bother with that like I have listed. Down here, we're going to do accept underscore keywords equals in the 64. I need that for installing the latest version of the Linux kernel, and accept licenses equals start. Now the accept license, it's license, is that some applications have a certain license that you need to read before using the applications, and to accept them you put them here. I would not really recommend agreeing to all of the licenses. I'm doing it because I don't really care a whole lot, but I know that if you're kind of a person that, you know, goes really deep into licenses, you should probably only accept licenses that you agree to. I'm just doing this because I'm lazy and don't feel like reading. And then grub for platforms equals EFI 64. This is so that later on in the installation, I will go ahead and enable EFI operating systems. If I don't do this, then I can't really use grub. This kind of needs to be here so that I can actually make a grub partition that I can actually boot into with EFI and not master boot record. So yeah, I think that's it that I need to put in here. So I'm gonna go ahead, and also I like to use Vim for this, but you don't have to use Vim. And this isn't really a tutorial, it's more of me just installing Gentoo and how I set it up. But I guess you could use it as a tutorial, but do not use it as a tutorial. Instead, use the Gentoo handbook. Just use this and don't complain to me about anything, please. Alright, now that that disclaimer's out of the way, date and time, all that set up, I already chose that. Alright. Oh, we're gonna go ahead and set up to your root. So, oh, actually, hold on. I know I already did this, but I forgot to add this dereference segment, so I'm going to redo it real quick. So here's another thing with the Gentoo installation thing. These make rslave options that it has here. This is all for systemd support. If you're going to install OpenRC, you don't need these. Trust me, you don't. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip over those. So mount types, if I can spell it correctly, proc/proc, and then because I'm already set my directory here, I don't need to type mount/Gentoo/proc. I can just put proc/. So mount rbind sys mount dev, and then I think the third one here is /run. Yeah, /run is the new one. And then if you're, it says here on the wiki that if you're using a non-Gentoo installation, that you should probably run the commands that it says. So I'm just going to do those real quick. And now we're going to go ahead and chroot into it. And here we are. So, well, source etc profile. And it has this whole export PS1 thing so that you can tell that this is your true rooted environment. I know that this is my true rooted environment because, well, I didn't mean to do that, but as you can see, this is what it's normally on my system. That's what it's on Gentoo by default, so I don't really need to mess with all that. So now we're going to do mount dev nvme 1 partition 1 to the boot partition, and then I'm going to swap on turn on the swap. So merge webrsync if I could spell. All right, that lets me know that it seems that my make.conf is valid. So let's go ahead and check the profiles. And yeah, okay, it's using the right one. So this is one of the things that you would be doing. For example, if you were going to install systemd and GNOME, you would probably want to use this GNOME one right here for installing GNOME and systemd. If you were going to use Linux hardened, you'd be using this. And yeah, and then all of these EXP ones and devs are like something different. And if you're using systemd, you'd want to probably be using this profile. Or when you pick stage 3, you probably want to have picked the systemd stage 3 if there was one. I don't remember. I think there was. Not too sure. But yeah, and then all of these dev ones do not touch because those are all the development profiles and you shouldn't really touch those. And if you don't want multi-lib, for example, then, you know, pick one of these. So we're going to go ahead and update the world set. So verbose update deep new use at world. And it says on the wiki to have it with //ask, but again, I already have it in my use flags, or my emerge default ops, so it's going to show up, and we have a whole lot of things to update. So this is, oh boy, this is going to take a while, but you know, it's the nice thing with Gentoo is that you set your use flags, and while you update the use flags, and it will compile features and whatnot based on your system. But this is going to definitely take a while, so I'll be back when this is done. Alrighty, so that took a while. It took like an hour and 40 minutes. Let's see. Yeah, mostly Rust and LLVM take the most. Somewhere in here. I'm probably not gonna find it, but there's the GCC, or the GNU C compiler compilation. Those three specifically take a extremely long time to install. So I should probably now go and set up the system. So Los Angeles. Merge config time zone data. There we go. So there we go. Before we get started, I need to go ahead and install Vim, and there was something else that I wanted to install. Oh, ZSH, that's what it was. I'm installing ZSH because that's the like terminal emulator, I guess, that I like to use. So I'm gonna go ahead and install that. So this shouldn't take too long to install. While this is actually finishing installation, I am going to go ahead and open up a new terminal, become root, clear, I'm going to go ahead and copy root shrc to mount Gentoo root, and then home doco.shrc to, I'll copy it to the home directory, but once I create my user, I'd want to put this in there. So what I should probably do, I think, is user mod shell bin zsh root, and then we're going to go ahead and exit and change this to be that. Oh, source etc profile. Okay, so this is okay. I'll just do bin bash for right now then. So I'll have to set that up later. But vim etc locale.gen. tf8, not that 8, and then locale gen. I definitely broke something. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and change this back to bin bash. Uh-oh. Oh. So that's why that didn't work. Okay. And then you select locale list set 4. When environment update. And we'll just go ahead and run the source again to be sure. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and this terminal tab. I'm going to merge Linux firmware, Gentoo sources, gen kernel, PCI utils. I think that's all I need to get to the next step here. And after this, we're going to get to the fun part of Gentoo Linux. Close Discord, I don't need that open right now. The fun part of Gentoo Linux, and that is compiling the kernel. So that's going to be fun. And by that, I mean this is going to take a while for me to set up. There are two ways that you can do. You can set up gen kernel, or to compile the kernel. There are two ways to do it. There's the main. Sorry, I'm kind of stuttering. So the two ways that you can compile the kernel is using gen kernel. Now for gen kernel, what you need to do is to just have gen kernel automatically create a kernel. In here, you would want to go ahead and add your boot partition. If you know anything about Linux, which you should have some previous knowledge on running, I would say at least if you know how to use Arch Linux, then this shouldn't be too hard to figure out. You'd have to add your boot drive into the FS tab, and then once you do that, you can just run gen kernel all. And well, actually, you select kernel list. You should do that, and then do gen kernel all, and it would go ahead and create a kernel to support basically everything under the sun, but it's going to take an extremely long time to compile. So, and this is where we get to the other way that you can do it, and that's to manually create, configure, and compile your kernel configuration. This is the part that's going to take a while. and you're probably going to want to have some kind of installation media that you can at least boot into multiple times, and especially one with a graphical environment, because trust me, you're probably not going to get a working kernel on the first try, but you might be able to. So a bit of a status update here on the video. This is me in feature editing. I'm going to make a pretty big jump cut here because there was the whole segment here that would have been me configuring the kernel and compiling it. It didn't work, it did not boot, and I had gone into a lot of troubles trying to get it to work. So I ended up just removing it out of the video so that I didn't sit here and bore everyone generating a kernel that doesn't even work. So I just went ahead, cut it out, and I'm probably going to make a part 1.5 where I go through and actually compile and create a kernel and whatnot. So that'll be a separate video. But yeah, just so you know, there's about this big jump cut. I just skipped the part of the custom kernel because, well, it didn't work. And if anything like this happens again in the rest of the video and the other parts relating to custom kernels and whatnot, I will, editor me will jump in and sort it out. Yeah, that's it. And while that compiles the init ram fs, I'm going to grab the file system IDs for the drives, or for the partitions for the system, to make the fs tab. So I'm just going to do this real quick while that compiles the init ram fs, just do a bit of multitasking. Okay. And this is pretty much done here. So again, the BusyBox CPIO data, probably going to take a minute. Yep, there we go. And there we go. So we are now going to go ahead and vim. Well, actually, hold on. Let's change directory to the root directory real quick. Actually, there. I'd rather be in the root directory there. So we're going to go ahead and vim etc fs tab, or nano if I could type. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to make a new line. I always like to put a comment and then most of the time what I'm going to have it as. So here I'm going to have the root file system. So I'm going to name this root file system. And then, yeah, this is ID system. So we're going to do UUID equals put the file system ID. Going to be the root partition. It's formatted as ext4. Then we're going to do no a time 0, 1. Boot partition UUID equals just going to type that one real quick. That's going to be boot. This is vfetch. No a time. And I'm just going to do the same for that. And then we have the swap. So we're going to do UUID equals that. None swap SW00. I am pretty much copying what is here by default, but for the boot partition, I would not recommend putting no auto, because if you put no auto, when the system starts up, it's not going to automatically mount this. It's going to mount it for it to boot, but once you're at the login screen, by then it's going to have already gone and unmounted it. So I would really recommend keeping this here, or not having no auto here, so that if you need to rebuild your kernel and you're booted into it, you don't have to manually mount it before it starts writing the kernel to an area that it's never going to read. So I would suggest doing that. And after that, well, technically, the system is basically bootable. I mean, from here you can install grub and then the system will boot. But there's some extra steps that we should do before we get to grub. So the first thing we should do is install dhcpcd. There used to be a whole puzzle with having to mess with a bunch of files and whatnot, but I'm skipping a few steps. My bad, don't do that. etcconf.d and hostname. What we should do first is set the hostname so that you can identify what your computer is. I'm going to call mine dhcpcd like it is on Arch Linux. And you can set the home network. I'm not going to. So I'm going to go ahead and vim into etc issue and delete this / and I think that's a capital O, so that it's not going to say dhcpc.unknown domain or dhcpc.none. And from here, what we're going to do now is, well, rc update add dhcpcd default. And I'm not going to start it right now because while we already have a network connection, you could use netifrc, but I'm going to use dhcpcd because it's easier. I'm going to skip over the host file. You don't need to modify that. PCM-CIA, if you have that, you should know how to use that. I don't have a PCM-CIA thing, so I'm not going to worry about it. And now we're going to go ahead and set the root password. So it is going to go ahead and ask for a pretty complicated password, so you should probably just agree with it. There is a way to, I guess, have it not do that. I'm not going to share that because if you're really going to be like that and not have good security, then, you know, you're on your own. But yeah, so sysklogd, not ds, gosh dang it. Sysklogd, there we go. All that. But yeah, there's a way to enforce weaker passwords, but I'm not going to share that. If you really want to enable weaker passwords, you can just Google it and eventually you'll find out. But I'm not going to share how to do that. But so now we're going to go ahead and add sysklogd to the default run level. This is a system logger, so pretty much everything the system does, it'll go ahead and log it so that if something happens, say there was an unexpected crash, you can pull the log up and yeah, you can just pull the log up, see what went wrong, and potentially fix it. There is you can use a cron daemon. I'm not going to use that because I haven't had a use for it at the moment. So, but you know, if you want to enable it and play with it, then whatnot, then you should probably go ahead and do that. But I don't, I don't think I need one, and I haven't had a use for it just yet, so I'm not going to install it. I probably should, but whatever. We're going to go ahead and add, I'm going to add SSHD to the default run level, so that if I'm doing KVM stuff, which we'll get into in the next part, there's going to be some times where the system might crash or the VM's not working, and you should probably restart the system correctly. Enable SSHD so that if there's a problem with the system, you can just SSH into the system and restart it safely there. On the DHCP client, well, I already did that earlier, so I don't know why it's brought up here twice. If you need a PPPoE client, just emerge PPP. and emerge IW and WPA underscore supplicant if you are using wireless networking. I'm hardwired to the internet with Ethernet, so yeah. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go back into the not that, gosh dang it, portage make.conf. If you do not have grub underscore platforms equals EFI hyphen 64, put it in now. If you don't, what happens in the next step is going to be completely different. If for whatever reason you need to boot the system with DOS, then, you know, just comment it out. But I do need this for running the system with an as a EFI, so I'm going to leave that alone and have it exactly how it is. And then just emerge grub. This might take a second, but yeah, if it's compiling EFI var in the EFI boot manager, there it should be building it for EFI, and if it says grub platforms over there and EFI is red, then that also means that it should probably be working as well. And there's one thing I forgot to also include in that emerge, but I'll worry about it later. It's not important. And while this is installing, if you forgot to add the grub platforms tag here into the make.conf and you do need it, just add it and then run this command, and it will go ahead and re-download and recompile grub with EFI support. So if you forgot to do it, don't sweat. You can just reinstall it after you add the thing into the make.conf. Just run emerge with update new use and verbose, just in case. And I don't really need to do verbose. You just need to add the update and new use flags to the emerge request, and it will go ahead and do that. And if you're running DOS, then you just do grub install and then point to the device. But I'm on EFI, so we need to do grub hyphen install target equals x86 underscore 64 hyphen EFI, and then EFI directory equals, and it should be slash boot. And another thing that I'm going to do here is bootloader ID equals Gentoo. So this hyphen bootloader hyphen ID section, it isn't covered in the handbook, and I don't even think the Arch Wiki even has this anymore. But you could put this down so that when you boot into your into the BIOS of your motherboard, it'll actually show up as with the name Gentoo instead of just grub. If you have multiple Linuxes installed, like I have Arch Linux installed, and then I'm also going to have Gentoo installed, you probably want to put this down so that when you start up, or when you go, if you have multiple Linux distros installed, you can easily find it. So I would recommend having it. And if for some reason you don't see it, just run the command again, but add removable here, so that if it's not showing up in your bootloader, if you add the removable tag, it should show up. And now we're gonna do grub mkconfig boot grub.config. And then after that, well, that's it. From here, you can reboot directly into the system. But I'm going to go to the finalizing step. So normally they have it set where you're booted into it, but I'm just going to do it here. So we're going to do user add mg audio users. I'll add wheel, sure. Which wheel lets you use the su command to become a super user or become root. I'm going to include it, but I know that there is a command that you can run where if you don't want to have wheel, then you can remove it. But that's, I think, all I'm going to need. maybe USB, but I don't know if that's still in there. Bin or -s bin zsh udaco creating mail. This creating mailbox file, no such file or directory. As far as I'm concerned, this doesn't mean anything, and it'll still work like normal. And then we're gonna do passwd and then my username. And then that's basically it for the rest of the installation. So I'm going to copy that home, zsh, zs8, home, lsa home. Huh. Thought copied. I guess I didn't. Hold on. Oh, well, I copied that to root, but well, actually, I don't think I did. Oh. Well, I guess that's definitely working. Well, I guess should do then is copy this to mount Gentoo home Kudako. Copy the. I have a different ZSHRC for root and my user, so I need to copy a different one over. But it also seems that ZSH is working. Well, if I can run a merge, then okay, yeah, it does work. I just don't know why it wasn't working when I was in the installer environment. Should probably keep it on bash anyways. But yeah, technically this is bootable, but you're gonna get nothing. So here's what I'm gonna do. Is I would normally go and install something like the GNOME desktop or use GNOME. Sometimes I'll use KDE Plasma, but both of those, especially KDE, takes a long time to install. Now, yes, my computer can run the KDE client. I mean, it will, but the problem with the KDE client on Gentoo is that it has, I think, 700 packages. It takes a really long fucking time to build. Take my word for it. That initial immerge that we did earlier, in where we were setting up the base system, that's child's play compared to building KDE and GNOME. So if you use tiling window managers like DWM or Xmonad, I'm going to install Xmonad. Those will take like not really a whole lot of time to install. So I'm going to be using Xmonad today. Though I should note, it's been a while since I've used Xmonad. I found my config, so I guess we'll see how well it holds up. So we're going to install Xmonad. And, oh, we're going to be here for a minute, aren't we? We're going to be here for a moment. So this might take a while, so I guess I'll be right back. Gosh dang it. Alrighty, now that that has been installed, what we're going to do now is merge xmobar the menu. I put XF or the GNOME terminal in there, but I'm going to do the XFCE4 terminal because it shouldn't take as long to compile as, say, the GNOME one. And we're probably going to also want a web browser, so I'm a sucker for the Microsoft Edge browser. Oh, it's just Microsoft Edge then, huh? Alright then. So, again, the XFCE4 terminal. Oh, this has to. Oh, yeah, this is gonna be a while as well. So, I'll be back when this is done. Let's see how long it takes. Yeah, we're gonna be here for a bit. a lot of the stuff might be from the XFC. Well, actually, I think a lot of this is Haskell stuff. Yeah, good chunk of this is all Haskell. Some of this is GTK stuff for the XFCE4 terminal, but a lot of the stuff shouldn't be too big, so it shouldn't take too long. I mean, yeah, we've already installed 12 packages of 162, so this shouldn't take too long. But in any case, it's still going to take a while to compile, so once again, I'll be back when this is done. And well, actually, I guess I can move these configs into the right place. So I need to go into the xmonad config real quick. And I'm going to change this real quick to be the XFCE4 terminal and not the GNOME terminal. And I'm going to change it in here as well. Reload from disk real quick so that this is the right one. XFCE4. And let me copy these in the right location. Well, I know where the xmonad config needs to go. It needs to go to, yeah, so I'll make their mount Gentoo. I guess I'll call it copy file. Oh. Sudo copy. These both start with the, yeah, so home, doco, xmo, file, to copy file, so both of those are there. Sudo chur mount Gentoo bin bash. And now we'll also have to make a .xinetRC, but okay, so we need to make their mount Gentoo. Well, actually, hold on. Let's su my, oh. Let's do that real quick. Make their xmonad Haskell. Whoop. rm rf xmonad. There. That's supposed to be a file, not a config, or not a folder. So sudo cp copy file xmonad.hs to xmonad.h. Copy it there. Oh, we do that then. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna wait until this is done then. Then I'll go and mess with config file stuff. So I'll be back when this is done. Alrighty, so this is all compiled. This didn't take too long to compile, but I had to go into town and get stuff, so yeah, so it didn't take too long. I think it only took like 20 minutes at most. Now that we have xmonad installed, the xmobar menu, and our web browser, I think it's time that what we need to do is go ahead and move the xmonad xmobar configs into their specific area. And I actually forgot to install something, which is xmonad contrib. That should be installed. This doesn't look to take too long, so it's probably fine. So we'll go ahead and install it. Okay, there we go. So we're going to go ahead and merge the last few things I'll install on this video. So we're going to install Pulse Audio, ASLA plugins, I think that's all I need. Oh, sudo. Probably want Discord installed. And pavu control. I think that's all I'm going to need for right now. See how long this, how big this is. If this is going to be, we're not going to compile it for now. I'll do it out of the video, but I will install sudo so that I don't need to, when I start up the system, I don't need to use root. It's not going to take a while to set up. Okay. Then do vi sudo real quick. And go all the way down here to root. I'm going to insert, do docu all equals all. This isn't really secure, but I might make a video on configuring the sudoers file, but I'm just going to do that. And I think all I need to do now is copy the x. Copy the x. Oh, I need to be in the root folder. Oh no, it was in copy files and then xmon add.hs to home udaco dot xmonad. That's been copied over. And let me take a look at the xmonad Haskell files. It needs to be in .config xmobar.com. Okay. So cp copy file xmobar.config needs to be home udocu config xmobar. Does it have a config folder? No. Okay. And I think that is almost it. We need to go into vim home go xinitrc, which is going to be exec dboss launch sh syntax exit with session xmonad. And I'm gonna also add elogin to default. I don't have a desktop or a name manager like like a SDDM or GDM installed, but if you're gonna install that along with whatever desktop environment you're gonna use, say Plasma or GNOME, you should probably go ahead and install elogin so that you can actually, well, log in or and whatnot. But if you don't have that there, it's not going to work. So I think that's it. So let's go ahead and do swap. No, that's fine. I don't need to do that. We're going to go ahead and type exit, change directory, mount r, mount Gentoo. You know, oh, that might be because that's still running. Let me unmount boot and then swap off. And then unmount this FSC. I'm sure it's fine, but I'm sure it'll be fine if I just go ahead and restart it now. So I'm going to do that, and I'll see you guys on the other side. So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just make a separate video on it. I guess it can be a part 1.5. Ah! So this time, it should load the gen kernel config, and if it does, then I guess I'll just have to cut the part out where I made my own kernel, and I guess I'll just